Hello everyone, I am Rahul Rishi. Today in this video we'll cover the aspects of union budget and the changes that have been brought through this budget in the social sector space. Primarily there are three changes that are going to affect the social sector space. We'll take such changes step by step. To start with, the first change that has been introduced through this budget is inclusion of slum development in Schedule 7 of the Companies Act, which states the activities that are required to be taken as part of CSR activities by the companies. What is interesting to note here is that by including slum development within the CSR space, the government has finally allowed the corporate sector to further strengthen and improve India's living conditions. For example, companies that fulfill a certain criteria and trigger the CSR provisions will now be allowed to participate in developing slum. Roughly 1/8 of India's urban population lives in a slum. According to the latest data released by the National Sample Survey Organization, that is NNSO, over half of slum population lives in urban centers, specifically metro cities. Thus, by including slum development within Schedule 7 of the Companies Act, the corporate sector will now be playing an equally important role in re-energizing their corporate efficiency and bringing changes through their CSR fund. The next topic that has been introduced in the union budget, having a considerable impact in the social sector space, concerns tax deductibility on CSR expenditure. In the context of tax deductibility for companies spending on CSR activities by way of creating capital assets, certain amendments have been proposed in the Income Tax Act. 1. CSR expenditure will not be allowed deductibility when CSR spending companies create capital assets under Section 37 of the Income Tax Act. 2. CSR expenditure for certain activities covered under Section 30 to 36 of the Income Tax Act will be allowed certain deductibility when such activities are carried for the purposes that I'll be listing out herein. A. When the expenditure towards payment to institutions for carrying out programs of rural development or conservation of natural resources. B. For expenditures on certain notified agricultural extension projects or programs. And C. When such expenditures are incurred for carrying skill development projects. What is very interesting to note here is that while the heads of CSR activities under Schedule 7 is very broad, and as per the recent Ministry of Corporate Affairs notification issued last month, wherein it was clearly stated that those activities are to be interpreted liberally. The tax deductible heads are narrow and there lies no scope for its liberal interpretation. Hence, there seems to be a limited convergence between the two legislations, denying the benefit that may have been otherwise available to us. It leads to a risk that CSR expenditure may get unduly concentrated in certain specific activities. It also leaves the door open for disputes arising from difference of interpretation on the scope of CSR activities vis-a-vis Schedule 7 of the Companies Act and Section 37 of the Income Tax Act. Now we come to the next point. Through this union budget, there has been a sincere effort to rationalize the taxation regime in the cases of charitable trusts or institutions. In the context of the exemption applicable in cases of religious and charitable trusts, certain amendments have been proposed in the Income Tax Act. First, in circumstances where trusts or institutions are registered under section 11 and 12 of the Income Tax Act, no exemptions would now be available to them under section 10 of the Income Tax Act. 2. In the context of determining whether 85% of the income of the trust is applied in furtherance of the objectives of the trust, a clear condition has been laid down wherein the trust or institutions will not be allowed to claim depreciation for assets in computing its income if the amount spent on the purchase of the asset is sought to be claimed towards application of 85% of such income. 3. The circumstances in which the registration of a trust or institutions can be cancelled has also been expanded. Interestingly, this specific provision within the finance budget with regard to expansion of the powers of the commissioner to cancel the registration of a charitable trust under section 12AA of the Income Tax Act has drawn a lot of attention. We'll look into both the aspects in terms of whether this expansion is good or is a matter of debate. Under the current taxation regime, cancellation of registration of a trust can only be made by the commissioner under two circumstances. One, when the trust is not genuine, and two, if the activities of the trust are not carried in furtherance of the object of the trust. Now, the bill proposes to amend this section by defining 4 more grounds for cancellation if the institution's activities are being carried out in such a manner that A. its income does not inure for the benefit of general public, B. if it is for the benefit of any particular caste or religion, C. if it is for the benefit of any specified persons such as the author of the trust or trustees, D. if the funds are invested in prohibited modes. What is interesting to note here is that the finance bill has not defined what is benefit for general public. At the same time, it has also not defined what is a prohibited mode of investment. Its interpretation, we believe, has been left to the discretion of the commissioner or the income tax authorities at best. The finance bill has also tightened the rules under which an NGO or a trust can seek tax exemption for money it has received from the sale of property held under the trust. The explanatory memorandum in the budget document explains that often NGOs ask for such relaxation. But it has clarified that when an NGO has got a tax exemption under section 11 of the Income Tax Act, which does not allow for sale or transactions, it cannot ask for a switch over to another section, that is section 1023C of the Income Tax Act, to claim such tax exemptions. To summarize, the overall intent of the union budget is quite noble in many ways. Inclusion of slum development within the CSR activity will go a long way in harnessing the efficiency and outcomes of corporate world to remove the income disparity. At the same time, there has also been an effort to rationalize the tax regime that is applicable to charitable trusts and institutions. However, by expanding the power of income tax authorities to cancel registration of certain trusts or NGOs, there has been a lot of discretionary powers that has been granted to them. It could be said that it is an indirect way to crack down on such NGOs, activities of which the government does not really concur with. However, given the fact that we have appropriate judicial forums wherein NGOs and such trusts can approach the court and seek redressal, we believe that section 12AA will not have any adversarial effects on the way NGOs function, and it would certainly lead to a further rationalization of the taxation regime that exists within the social sector space.